The plans to set about some sort of conclusion or to define a new ceasefire between Israel and Gaza look as if they're on the verge of collapse, even as negotiations start. 240 people were captured as hostages by the Hamas group on October the 7th during the terrorist attack when 1,200 Israelis were killed senselessly. And so many of those who were killed would have defined themselves as peace activists and in favor of a greater interaction between the Palestinians and the Israelis. It's ironic. Of the 240 hostages, 3 were killed in a ridiculous friendly fire episode by the Israelis. 30 are believed to have died. 4, I think, were initially released by Hamas. And then recently, Hania's 3 sons were killed in an attack. And Hania has said, the Hamas leader in Qatar, has said that this will not pressure him into softening his resolve and softening his position. And Israel is now offering 900 prisoners, 900 Palestinian prisoners, in return for the release of 40 hostages that Hamas says today it is not sure it can even locate or find or produce because it doesn't have the captors meeting the humanitarian criteria that have been laid out by the CIA brokers, the Qataris, the Egyptians in their deal. So the deal looks very shaky at the moment. Now, 112 hostages were returned in the last exchange last year, but now Israel acknowledges some have been killed in the Israeli strikes. Hamas certainly suggests some have been killed. And Hamas's aim is to have a full withdrawal. And what I find so extraordinary is with the Hamas leader resident in Qatar, how on earth can Netanyahu realistically can possibly claim, that he is wiping out the Hamas leadership, the Hamas system from Gaza, that he's wiping out its influence when Hamas is controlled from another country? It's a futile war aim, and it proves the impossibility of the campaign, of the ground campaign, from the very beginning. I keep coming back to this issue about a just war. It's a medieval idea, though some of the concepts go back to ancient India. Some of the concepts go back to Egypt. You can find ideas of the just war in many societies. It's not exclusive to the medievals. But in that medieval presentation, there are 4 major points: that you have to have a competent authority, that I can't declare a war. It has to be declared by the leader of the country. I think that's probably met in this case. Netanyahu was the leader of the country. That it has to have the possibility of success. Now, I don't think that has been met, and I don't think it could have been met. So the just war fails on that point. It has to be seen as a last resort. Well, again, I think it fails because despite the fact that Israel has a right to defense, does it have a right to go to war? In this particular case, particularly against a civilian population, a heavily crowded civilian population like the Gaza Strip. And was it a last resort? No. It was a knee-jerk response that was actioned within a matter of days. And is it a just cause? That again is questionable because the possibility of success is very small. And then when you go to the second part of the just war theory, the jus in bello, one of the key principles there is proportionality. And however you look at it, the overwhelming weapons, the overwhelming sophistication of the Israeli weapons, in contrast to the Hamas weaponry, and the way in which the Gazan territory has been razed to the ground, does not speak of proportionality. It speaks of a tyrannous rage. It speaks of revenge, and it falls short of the good intentions of a just war. Now, incidentally, I would also invoke the principle of just war when looking at the war waged by Russia on Ukraine. And there, equally, there will be people who say it's not appropriate. It's this is too theoretical. This is too idealistic. But Patriarch Kirill embraced the principles of the just war in a conference in the early part of the century, and in defiance of the rest of the Orthodox community, which sees the just war theories of the medieval world as being a Western idea. And so I think Russia should be judged on the same criteria. Is this a just war in Ukraine? No, because again, the principle of jus in bello, proportionality, is not correct. And equally, the possibility of success, well, that might unfortunately be a credible aim, but a last resort. Was that war the last resort? No, not at all. Again, it was a knee-jerk and a surreptitious, a sleight of hand, a nasty piece of manipulation. And was there a just cause? So if there's only 4 criteria for conducting a just war, some people would say there's 5 or 6. I say there's 4. And 2 of them are failing, as they are demonstrably in the Israeli campaign against Gaza and in the Russian campaign against Ukraine. And if both campaigns are failing in practice in terms of proportionality, neither is a just war. Neither is just. And this is quite apart from whether or not we recognize that, for example, Israel has a right to defend itself. Of course it does. But that's not the same thing as saying Israel has a right to go to war against the Gazan Strip. These 2 things are separate. And I'm afraid in so much of the rhetorical flourishes that you hear, both in the government and elsewhere, these 2 things are conjoined and are mixed up. It's important to separate them.